Tracy, how are you?
I'm great. I'm very excited. How has your week been?
Yeah, week's been good. It's been pretty packed. Been focusing on a lot of work opportunities, but also I had a meeting with my local library because I'm interested in doing some community work with them, and so I got to meet some members of the library. And they showed me around. It was really interesting seeing the back end of how the library works. So yeah, I'm interested in getting involved in some volunteer work and giving back to the community. So that was a great highlight of my week.
Awesome, brilliant. And what kind of work would you be doing at the library? Just curious.
So it varies. It can be anything from, for example, they hold numerous events throughout the year. And they need organisers to prep for that event. There's also things like, for example, the elderly community, members of the elderly community who may not be mobile enough to come into the library. And so it's a case of running around with on like a mobile book bus, and then delivering books, that kind of checking in on and making sure they're okay in their homes. It could be just general library work in terms of just directing and giving members of the public some information about what they're looking for. It could be holding reading times for children. In my local library, they've actually got some stairs, some colourful stairs, which you can actually sit on. I didn't realise, but they actually, in the early morning, they actually convert that into a slide.
Oh, how cool.
So you get lots of kids in the morning around between 8 and 9, and they actually come in and actually go through the slide, and then after they've kind of like, or they basically have like a few books read to them, but that's their playtime.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. I would love that. I wish they had that in my library.
I know, that's right. I remember when I was younger, I did have an experience where there was a book bus, where a bus used to come. I think it's every Thursday mornings. I think I was about 8 or 9 years old. I still remember it, and it was like the size of an ambulance, and we converted it into a little mini library, and I just loved it. And there was also a library on a canal boat in England. And that was unbelievable. Wow. I think it still exists. It's in the area of Granary Square in King's Cross, if any of our listeners...
What, in London?
In London, yes.
Oh, wow.
So if any of our UK listeners are out there and they happen to be in a London area, then around Granary Square, there is a canal boat library. And the last time I went there, which is last year, I went there and there was actually a parrot inside the library too, inside the canal boat, and I surprisingly made my way in there. So yeah.
Oh wow, that's really cool. I wish I'd have had that growing up. I mean, we had the library, brilliant, we did have that, but it would have been nice to have one that came around a bit like an ice cream van. I know it sounds weird, but you know, I would have loved that because I loved books as a kid. I still love books. I still read books. I don't read as much as I would like to, but yeah.
I love that kind of comparison, because it's exactly like that, Tracy. You hit the nail on the head. It's like an ice cream van, but I suppose with the library books, maybe they'd have to have a different jingle or a tone. So probably. Maybe classical music. I don't know. But that's not a bad idea. Maybe there's a gap in the market here. You know, maybe that's an idea that can be kind of rethought. Rebranded and launched.
If it would encourage kids to read more, it would be great.
It would be. Because if you think about it, it's like, if you get like, I mean, even ice cream vans. I mean, I don't know if it's the place that I live in. You don't get ice cream vans anymore.
No, but I mean, the point of those, they come to places where you can't get ice cream unless it's in a supermarket. And really, in the suburbs, they generally have a place where you can go and buy ice cream, like Gillette, especially where you live.
Yeah, but when I was growing up, I mean, I grew up in a place called Coventry, and it's not a tiny village, it's a city. And there were corner shops, there were supermarkets down the road in the town centre and pretty nearby. But every week we always had an ice cream van come to our road. I don't know whether or not why that's died down, but yeah, there are I live near the beach now, and there's an ice cream van on the beach, but it's static, it's just parked.
Right.
So it could just as well be a hut.
Oh well, fair enough. Well, and maybe we'll bring them back. So
Yeah.
I'm very excited today because we have a guest speaker. We have a guest.
Do.
We do. And you know this guest. So her
Mm.
name is Frankie Rimi-Cheng. And Bhavna, how do you know Frankie?
So Frankie and I met when I was working in the creative industry a number of years ago, maybe about 6 years ago, 7 years ago. I was working at an advertising agency, which was specializing in digital marketing. And at the time, the industry, in the creative industry, especially in the last 10 to 12 years, the industry has really changed. Digital has seriously taken off. Like when I joined the industry, not so long ago, there was hardly really any movement in terms of digital marketing agencies. And now, you can't go through Darlinghurst without so many digital marketing agencies left, right, and centre, and on every corner. So that's how much it's really changed and evolved. So when I was working in the industry, I was responsible for finding talent, and at the time, the company were taking on some very important and groundbreaking digital projects, and we didn't have enough talent in the team who could basically, with that experience, because there's a lot of pitching going on for repeat business and to retain business. A really important time. And so I went out on the marketplace because I was searching for talent, and Frankie's name kept on landing on my desk. And so I ended up bringing Frankie onto the team on a contract basis, on a short-term basis. And she basically she just blew everyone out of water with her creative skill set, and it was all focused on the digital side of things. And what ended up happening was that when the company then had more digital projects, which they did, everyone would just request Frankie. So Frankie very fast became a very must-have person to have on your projects when it came to digital design. And I think that's very groundbreaking in the industry, and it'd be great to hear from Frankie in terms of how she got where she has and the challenges that she's faced. And so it'd be really interesting to hear from Frankie in her own words about that experience, because in our podcast, Tracy, these are the themes that have come up in our chats in terms of being a female and in a groundbreaking industry, balancing work and life when you've also got focus on starting a family, the pressures that someone in that position would have and how they navigate around that. So I thought it'd be useful, and it'd be great to really hear it in Frankie's own words.
All right, well, let's not keep her waiting. So without further ado, it's our pleasure to welcome Frankie. Frankie Rimi-Cheng identifies as a cis bisexual woman and as a design director at Banter Projects, who specializes in branded digital experience and was nominated for this year's Women in Tech's People Choice Award. She loves anything that marries function and joy, and is a mum to 2 kids under 5 years old. Frankie married an Aussie and moved to Australia about 6 years ago from the States. Her dad was in the US Air Force, so she moved around a lot as a child. Frankie really loves talking about things that should be normal, things to talk about, but aren't quite there yet for everyone, such as being queer, everyone getting paid appropriately, menstrual cycles and pregnancy, sex, anything that's a shy away topic that really shouldn't be. And that's what we're all about here at All1nclusive. So thank you, Frankie, for joining us.
Hello. How's it going?
Good.
Great to hear from you, Frankie. How are you?
Yeah, same. Yeah, doing well. Saturday morning, enjoying the nice cold weather finally coming in, which is good.
Yeah. I have to apologize. We went a bit on and on a bit, didn't we? About how Bhavna met you.
Yes.
So we were like, oh, better let her in. And then, anyway, you're here. Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, of course.
I so appreciate it. And I'm just curious, like, what did you think of the podcast? Because I know that Bhavna sent you an episode to listen to.
Yeah, I think it's great. It's what I really enjoyed is that you guys are very conversational. So you're talking about your day to day, like what's going on in the world, and it's just a normal conversation. Like it's not staged. You're not staging anything. So I thought it'd be really lovely to come on and just meet you as well as Tracy.
Cool. Well, it's definitely a pleasure to meet you. So thank you for being here. And I guess we'll get stuck in because we want to know all about you.
Sure.
For what I've seen and heard, you are an incredible person.
Thanks. That's really sweet. That's so nice to hear. You know, when you're a freelancer and a contractor and you kind of just go around meeting people all the time, they don't usually start off like that because they're trying to hire you for work. So they're like, oh, yeah, you seem to know what you're doing. You seem to be pretty good. So it's nice to hear, like, you think I'm an expert, you fancy what I do, and you think highly of me. That's so nice.
Yeah, it's great to have you contribute to a podcast too, Frankie. And I know one of the reasons why it's great to have you here is because I know that most recently you've been nominated for an award.
That was interesting. Yeah, the B&T People Choice Award. So just being involved in that is pretty cool. So it was a list of, I think they said 333 women that got nominated around Australia for the B&T awards, and they put everybody in for the People Choice Award, which I think is great. Like, it's great just to include everybody and kind of push it out to your network and get people involved and knowing that, women are starting to do things for themselves and have these awards dedicated to them in tech, which is a big one, which is good. That's a win, I think. Yeah, so it was nice. And it was nice to see everyone kind of promote me and come together and say nice things. Because I, as somebody that's like a tech designer, I'm kind of, head down in my computer all day working on digital solutions. So I don't get to talk to people much, like I'm not an account director or somebody that talks to clients all day, working out their solutions and whatnot. So yeah, it was really cool. It was nice.
Yeah, and that particular award, it's there because obviously women are underrepresented in the tech industry. And so what's your take on that, and what's your experience been like in terms of representation in the tech industry?
Yeah, definitely. So I started off my career working with a startup company, actually, in tech. So they had a mobile app that they had created, and I was helping as a dual position. I was like doing their marketing collateral, but also helping on the app, as well as like networking and everything you do as like a junior in a creative position. And yeah, I found there was a lot of guys, and they were like kind of surprised every time they met like a junior female designer, and they're like, oh. And that was in New York, so lots of networking, lots of meeting of other people. And I actually, like, I don't think there was a lot of other female junior designers. There was like female CEOs, which was great, so that was a good initiative. And then I came to Australia 6 years ago, and I almost felt like I was starting over again. It was really interesting. Yeah, I feel like Sydney, but it's split. Like, half the companies are very aware of this and are finding solutions for that, but half of them aren't. They're just like still going with like male creative directors and not thinking about like having a female creative director to kind of have that point of view to work with. They'll just have 2 male creative directors or 3 male creative directors. Yeah. So that's what I found.
So you definitely found that distinction in the regions, like the Americas versus Asia Pac or Australia.
Yeah, so far that's the experience I've had. And I think as a contractor, because I've changed clients every so often, I have been exposed to like a few companies. Like, I think I've been at least 15 companies since I've moved here, and most of them are set that way. But then the ones that aren't, I actually find that they're doing a lot better. Like, they're just more successful in general. And then the ones I find that I'm like, I just wanted to flag, I think you're not thinking about like all these different point of views, like not even if it's women, but like, queer point of views and things like that. They just kind of forget. And I find that they struggle to get the right creative or have an impactful campaign or client satisfaction. Even when clients like, fight something a bit, they don't realize, because they're coming to you as the experts. At the end of the day, when the campaign goes live, they're like, that's not as impactful as we thought it would be. And it's like, I wonder why.
Right. I see. And so because you mentioned about when you first started, there wasn't very many females at all. So what got you interested in tech, and was there any role models for you at that time?
Honestly, funny enough. So when I was in uni, I was really passionate about being a graphic designer, but I actually had no interest in like designing websites. I was like, no, I love the craft. I want to like make little cute packages and do logos, and that's all I want to do for the rest of my life. And then I graduated and I got into the field. And I did do some branding. I worked at a studio that did some branding, like logos and identity. But then after you create that, it needs to be implemented and the word kind of needs to get out there. So they would have me design their websites. And so I started doing that. And then there was more need for that. And people just kept asking me to do websites and asking me to do websites. And I was like, all right, I guess I'm going to do websites. And I can't help myself from like doing it the right way. And tech is so involved. There's so many elements like pixels and dimensions and mobile responsiveness. So I just started learning more and more and more. And then when I moved here from New York, I kind of needed an angle to position myself as a graphic designer within Sydney. So I stuck to digital. I was like, I'm really good at digital. I can make you a nice website. It's going to function. It's going to work. It's going to be impactful. It's going to hit the right audience. So I just started specializing in that. And then word of mouth, I just kept getting new clients, and it's just what I do now.
Yeah. And what sorts of obstacles did you come up against in this very male-dominated industry?
Yeah. So when I work for myself and I'm kind of like the sole creative, or I'm working with a marketing team or a strategy team, I find that people listen to me because I'm the only creative, so that like she's the creative, she knows what she's talking about, she's the expert. But then when I get put on creative teams where there are males that are making the calls on certain things, it's very strange. It's like such a social thing. It becomes like a boys club. So you'll have like these guys that they're like, oh, what if we do this? Like you'll just be, you banter when you're what is that, like workshopping ideas, right? They're like, oh, what about this, or what about this? Oh, isn't that funny? And they like instantly go to comedy. It's like a safe space for them. I mean, I do as well, but like I joke about the things that would be relatable to what we're working on, but they're joking about personal experiences, I find. And that's probably not always the case. It's just the experience I've had.
Yeah, it's that creative industry vibe where it is very much based on banter. And you're right, there is that kind of old boys network kind of in play. And I mean, I haven't worked in the industry in many years, but I don't know how much it's changed. But I know that I spent about 18 years in the industry, and during those 18 years, it definitely evolved. But that old boys club, that banter, it really did stay. And I suppose, especially with contributing to this podcast, I've had times to reflect on my experience in the creative industry. I think to myself, in terms of pushing myself as a female and also being a person of color, I remember in the industry, there were many times when I was the only person of color in the room. And so, and I didn't really pay much attention to that, but I suppose it was always there. And you're still working in the creative industry. Like, how has the creative industry evolved for women?
Yeah, for sure. So I think women supporting women is a big help. So when we do connect and find each other, supporting each other. Now, like I'm white, so I'm not a person of color, but when I do connect with other women that are people of color, even men that are people of color, being an ally is really important. And you don't have to be a white savior. You don't have to be like, yes, this is this person and we need to do this thing for them. Like ask them. They have all the answers, and representing them in creative is really important. So, and that starts from like concept phase. Like if you're going to pull a stock image, pull diverse stock imagery. It doesn't always have to be white people. Like I was walking down the street the other day in my town in the inner west of Sydney, and I was like, why is everybody Caucasian, like on every single ad I'm looking at? Like it's not that hard. And it's not even that the population is mostly that, because it's not. You know what I mean?
Tracy and I was thinking of we had a podcast recently about diversity and marketing initiatives. Do you remember, Tracy, when we mentioned that?
Yeah, I mean, actually, it just reminded me of something. When I was working in the pharmaceutical industry, we do recruitment ads to get recruitment to attract patients into trials. And I remember feedback from the team to the digits, back to the vendor, the digital guys, that the ads they were creating were not aligned with the population because they were white, because they weren't white. They were Americanized because you have people of color, like African Americans in ads. And I actually agreed with them, actually. I did agree. But then the flip side of that for me now is that, well, there should have been non-white people that are representative of the population, because they are African American. If that guy in the ad looks African American, I mean, he could be African heritage living in Australia for sure. But more common is Asian background, Indian background. So there could have been that as a compromise, but that wasn't talked about. And what primarily was talked about is, oh no, why?
Yeah.
And actually, it just made me think about. And I wouldn't have thought to say anything at that time, but it's thinking about it now after the work we've been doing. So
yeah. And Frankie, do you find that now what's happening in the creative industry in terms of content? Like, is there, like, how much attention is being paid to it? Because this is our chance to get a look behind the scenes from you, Frankie, in terms of like what's happening in these marketing campaigns. Because, you know, are there conversations being had around how we representing diversity for this company, for this product? Is that prevalent?
Yeah, so I can speak to my experience. So at an agency level, I find they're aware of it, but they're still like dipping their toes in. They're like, let's be safe and mostly stick what we have, but like represent a little bit more of the population, right? So that's happening. But I also find it's industry based. So like Tracy, you're talking about pharma, so they are aware of that and they're doing a little bit of that. But then there's like fashion clients they have to be, right? Otherwise they're going to get canceled on social media, which is still a thing. That's still a thing that's happening, right? So if they're not representing different body types, different backgrounds, even accessibility, like making sure you have alt text for imagery on websites so that it's accessible and you can have a reader to read it off, font sizes being like a good size for reading, all of that. That's a baseline. That's not even like innovation, you know what I mean? Like you need to have those things, otherwise you're not hitting your baseline. So yeah, it is happening in certain industries as a standard, but then in other industries they're still kind of dipping their toes in.
I see. Right. Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting and good to hear. And I have to say, I have noticed way more, because I remember actually really noticing, like, surprise, oh, somebody looks like me on that bus. You know, it's like, oh my God, she looks like me. And just noticing that all of a sudden, I'd say in the last few years, really.
Yeah, it's definitely been the last few years. And I love to hear that, because I do have 2 girls under 5 that are half Chinese and half white. And I'm American and my husband's Australian. So they're also like dual citizens. They're American and Australian. So like having this mix and then thinking about when they're older, are they going to see representation? Are they going to see someone like them?
Yeah, it's really, really important. I think people underestimate the impact of that sometimes. But and then talking about this, because we do like to touch on the discrimination, not because we want to be like, oh, this is terrible and this happens, but really what we're interested in is knowing if that's a reality that you've experienced and how you handled it, if that's the case.
Yeah. So I used to be pretty shy and like keep to myself when I was in my younger 20s, but now I'm in my 30s and I'm like, I got this. So I kind of flipped the switch. So I went from not saying much, you know, having a lower salary than most of my male companions, and then going to advocating, like hearing stuff about people like girls being like, oh, I don't know if I'm good enough, or oh, they told me I wasn't doing a good job, and I'm like, but you are doing a good job. But you need to tell them. They don't know. They're not standing next to you all the time, like watching you do your work. You have to advocate for yourself. And then watching them like change, like it changes in their eyes. They're like, you're right, I do a good job. Why don't I say anything? I have these reviews. So telling them to do those things, stick up for yourself, and you are good at what you do. And if you weren't, you'd probably say you were good at your job if you weren't good at your job. So like I understand it's hard, but you'll get there. You can do that. And then things like just pointing out things that happen in an office space that aren't like appropriate. So I have an example for this that I think is a good example because it's good-hearted and like they weren't thinking about the impact of it. So Mardi Gras being a big celebration in Sydney, obviously, right? And we're speaking to like queer rights and love is love and all that and inclusivity. I love Mardi Gras. I think it's great. We don't celebrate it like that in the States, so I thought that was really cool. So at work, like a lot of offices will do things for that. And one time, like HR did this. They sent out an email to everyone at the company that was assumed gay. Like they didn't go around asking anybody, like, right? And it's also Mardi Gras, like it's about inclusivity and like, being together in support of all of this. And somebody brought it up to me and they were like, did you get that email? And I was like, no, I didn't get that email. What are you talking about? And they were like, yeah, it wasn't BCC'd or anything. Like I saw everyone on the email and I didn't think I saw your name. And I myself, like I'm queer, I'm bi. So I'm married to a man now. So I'm in a, hetero appearing relationship, but like I did date women and men. And so it was like, oh, why would they do like, wouldn't they just send that to the whole company and be like, hey guys, we're going to celebrate Mardi Gras. What do you think would be a good idea? And then from that, have a list for all of us to choose from what we do. But yeah, that blew my mind. That was like 4 years ago.
That is shocking. That's almost like a professional platform of outing of people.
Yeah, that too. Like, yeah, like the person that was out like had a husband and everything, and so like, sure, but like,
There's also assumptions. It's like whoever selected the employees to be on the email.
Yeah, how do they know who's
from their perspective? And how would you ever know?
You don't. You have to.
I think that's the highest level of assumption I've come across.
That's extraordinary. I can't even comprehend that. I get that. I mean, they wanted to celebrate. They wanted to say that we celebrate this community. But wow, I think they mustn't have had their
thinking cap on, had their coffee yet. Yeah. So I found out at lunch, and as soon as I got back from lunch, I was like, hey, just so you know, like you shouldn't do this.
I'm surprised you pulled it up on it.
Sure, Frankie did.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm sure that there must have been more than just yourself, Frankie, who would have like reported that or just pulled it up.
You would have hoped so, but I think honestly I would have been the only one. I think I honestly would have been the only one because nobody in the email said anything. They were kind of bashful about it. And that's why I'm pretty sure that's why they brought it up to me, because I had been known for saying stuff about improper processes and whatnot. Because everyone needs to like feel comfortable at work. You can't make anybody like, I don't know if you've seen any like American high school movies and dramas where everyone's got little cliques and whatnot.
Yeah.
It's very much actually like that. Like it's very close to reality. So I, having been through that, I'm like, no, we don't do that as adults. I mean, we shouldn't do it at all, but we definitely don't do that as adults.
Good for you, Frankie.
Yeah, that's like good for you. I really like that example. I just can't imagine anyone doing it. I like the idea, but they should have sent it to everyone. You're right, not presumed who was and wasn't queer, gay, bisexual, whatever. That's just insane. Anyway.
Yeah, and just the whole idea of this selection process behind the scenes going on, that's just it really is shocking. It really
how much time did they spend doing that without having a little light bulb go off?
And on what criteria? It's crazy. It's really crazy. Wow. And so you mentioned, Frankie, but you've got 2 young children under the age of 5. And I know that the experiences that I've had with you, Frankie, I know that I've previously reached out to you for projects and you've been on maternity leave or on maternity break, and you've still said yes, which is a testament to your work ethic. But tell us about that. Tell us more about your experience around around challenges you've had around, you know, focusing on family, but also pressures you might have had, retaining your reputation in the workplace, and also navigating motherhood through the pressures of work.
Yeah, definitely. So I have two now. So the first one would have been 5 years ago. So she's still 4, and now I have a 1-year-old. And I think the experiences between the two were definitely different. So for the first one, I was a contractor, so I didn't have any mat leave or anything. So I still, like, if I wasn't making money, then like there was no money coming in. So I did go back to picking up some work around 2 months. She was like 2 months old. But just picking up a little bit of work and only working from home. And this is pre-pandemic, so working from home was like, oh, that's right. So it's very surprising, but luckily I was able to pull it off, which was good. And then going back into the workplace with the first one, it was like, you know, you're expected to be in the office and you're there from like 9 to 5, and so having to balance like daycare and pickups and drop-offs with my husband, who is like a rock star. Like we're definitely in an equal partnership, which is nice. So making all that happen, but I was also breastfeeding. So like going into these workplaces and being like, hi, do you have a room where I could pump breast milk in? And then being like, oh, and some of them like having that, which was really great. I was like, awesome. And some of them not having that, and then making spaces for me, which was good. At least nobody pushed back and was like, sorry, you can't do that. I guess we'll have to find a new designer or something. So I didn't come across that, which was nice. But yeah, it was challenging and exhausting. And I was actually quite like, it was a pro to the whole COVID situation and having to work from home again. I was getting to a point before that where like my partner and I were really like kind of missing each other. We were going to work like 8 hours a day, but then you have the commute and you have like the pickup for the baby, and then you have to like, you know, have dinner, and then you have to give them a bath and put them to sleep. And so like we just weren't seeing each other. We were exhausted. And then the pandemic happened and we were spending every hour with each other and entertaining a toddler at that point. And it was really interesting going through all that. So then post-pandemic, I have my second, and everything's a bit more flexible. Like work-life balance is a bit easier because we all went through something together, and we understand it's not easy and it's kind of hard. So yeah, it was a bit easier. I was a full-time employee at that time, so I did get a few months of mat leave pay, which was lovely. It felt like a treat to myself, which is funny. Like it should just, you know, happen anyway, but it felt like a little treat, which was nice. And I got to spend some time with the baby and the 4-year-old before she started kindy, which was nice. And yeah, so now current state, really great balance. Like I find it's psychological. You have to go into your workplace and be like, hi, I'm here to work, and I'm going to work and get my job done for the day. And then I'm going to go home to my family, and that's that. So I think that is a healthier balance than going to work from like, you know, 8 a.m. till 7 p.m. and just like trying to push through the day, but you're potentially exhausted from working a full day the day before, or like you're bored because you've been staring at the same thing for a few hours. So I just go in, I get my job done, and then I go home to the family. If an emergency happens, like I'm still accessible, but I'm not exhausted from being at work for, 10 hours. So I can answer you.
Yeah. I mean, I'm totally on board with that. I agree with you. Post-pandemic, some of the great things that came out of that was the companies psychologically more comfortable with this whole flexibility and working from home. That's definitely one of the positives that have come out of that. And the other thing I've heard generally from older generation criticizing the younger workforce, maybe Gen Z, Gen whatever, they get a lot of criticism, saying, oh, they just want to work from home. And in our day, everybody was in the office and you went 9 to 5. There's none of this, oh, I have to work from home, or, criticizing. But I'd say, well, it's very different now to it was then, in the sense that then when everybody worked in the office at 9 to 5, they worked 9 to 5. We didn't work 7 till 8 or 8 till 7 and in the night, and have the mobile phones constantly replying to work emails, constantly checking work emails, waking up and checking work emails. That was not in that generation. So it's completely different workforce now. And so we need to accommodate those pressures by having more flexibility. Anyway, that's just a side thing.
No, I agree with you. And I see that happening. Like the younger people that I work with are exposed to work all the time. They're constantly talking about how they got an email at 7:30 in the morning being like, hey, do you have all this stuff together for XYZ? And you're like, make sure you log off an hour early and make up for that. And they're like, no, I'll stay on. So I actually like, although, yeah, those comments are being said, I actually find they work really hard. I think they are more in tune with their lives and understand that they're looking for their own happiness, whether that be their career, whether that be hanging out with friends. So they have to work hard at their job to make money and keep a job to hang out with their friends, or if it's the job itself, like if they really just want to do well in their career.
Yeah, definitely. I do think they work hard. It's just a different work environment for them.
Yeah.
It's about accessibility, I would say, in terms of the accessibility, like nowadays, like, we're talking about different generations. It's like the accessibility with the younger generation now, it's 24 hours. Whereas, like, I remember when I first started out in the industry, like 18 years ago or more, it was literally like, if you couldn't get them on a landline, it was like, that was it. It was like, there was another solution in place. But because, it's accessibility, it's 24/7, and it doesn't matter which global location you're in. And I think that's definitely changed over times too.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a couple of more questions, because I could talk to you forever, actually, Frankie. That's why I'm like, it's so interesting. As a cis bisexual woman, and actually you talked about this already, but I just want, if you've got anything else to add, how do you navigate advocating for diverse groups without falling into the white savior category?
Yeah, really important, huh? So yeah. So there's like personal and then there's work, right? So personally, I moved to Australia 6 years ago. So I'm still learning about the history of Australia, what's happened here, and whatnot. But luckily, my husband's Australian. He was born here, and he is able to like, give me insights to all of that. So even things like Australia Day, right? Like moving the date and whatnot. Like I went to an Invasion Day rally, and I thought like, and I took the kids with me, and I was like, this A is exposing you to like a history of Australia, and B, it's showing you what's happening currently because of that history. So that's a personal thing that I do outside of work. And then at work, pointing out things like diversity, like we were talking about earlier. But as a creative, like that's my job, is to point those things out. Like, and as a digital design lead or a UX UI design lead, like user experience, right? Is somebody coming to this website, and are we making it accessible for them? So like the font sizes and color contrast, all those things I was talking about. But then there's a second level to that on top of just like the baseline access to the website. It's, do they feel welcomed here? Do they want to shop on an e-com site? Do they feel like they're getting the information that they need on a medical website? So that's the second part of it. That's the creative aspect of it. And then there's another thing, which is like workplace culture, which is the example I gave earlier, but also like sitting with different people, having lunch with different people, talking to different people, not assuming that I know anything about them or their culture, right? And asking those questions, having those conversations. Workplaces are great places to talk to people and just get to know them. Yeah. And let them tell me what they want to tell me about themselves. Like dropping the information that I'm bisexual, like you don't just walk into a room and say it. So it's really funny when I do drop it into a conversation, because then my colleagues will either say something at the time, which normally doesn't happen because it's kind of funny to react, to be like, oh, did you just say you were bi? But they'll bring it up later and they'll be like, oh, I think you said like you were bi, didn't you? Like, how was your experience with that? Like, and how does that change as you get married? Like, you're still you, aren't you? And then you get to have those conversations, which is really nice. And because you see each other every day, you get to do it in the right, like you get time to think about doing it in the right way. Like, oh, I'm going to ask a little question about this. You don't feel like you have to get the answer right then and there, which is quite, confronting. Yeah. So yeah, all those things, I like build it slowly into your work life. You don't need to like go in guns a-blazing or anything, you know, just make it the norm.
Yeah, the conversation, getting to know someone. Yeah, I really like that, because I actually I have seen in workplaces that sometimes cliques that do develop, essentially same people, not always. And I think you just give some really great advice there, you know, sit with someone else at lunch, chat to someone else, getting involved in work groups or think tanks or initiatives where you'll have the opportunity to work with other people, maybe not even in your department, other departments and things like that. So that's a good tip, actually.
Yeah, for sure. And it's also a tip that kind of needs to go to like the higher ups, like having like setting up environments where this can happen, like pros and cons to hot desking, of course, but like I do like hot desking and being able to move around and meet different people. But you can also build it into like a profitable situation. Everyone loves to hear that, the higher ups profitable. If you create environments where, sure, you have departments, you'll have your marketing team and your product team and your production team and all that stuff, but creating projects or leaving opportunity for people to create projects where there's collaboration and overlap. Like, I think you can have a marketing experience that is interactive, that is done in a guerrilla style, like you're out on a sidewalk and you're going to do something marketing related, but you get like a digital team involved to think about that. Do you do an installation piece? Do you have something projected on a wall? And then that creates a collaborative environment within the workspace, but then it also creates a marketing opportunity to reach audiences that maybe you wouldn't have reached before because you're doing it in a different media.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I like the idea of that whole cross-pollination, because it's basically creating an environment where you can learn from one another, you know. And you know, I love the fact that, you know, Frankie, you've just shared about, you know, when you say things, when you drop things in conversation, you know, people may not necessarily ask you at that time, but then, you know, they might approach you later on, and that's curiosity. That's also learning about different perspectives. And that's, you know, that's what's great about this. So yeah, and that's what contributes to then any becoming a norm.
And I do give advice sometimes to people who really don't, or ask the question, how do I ask that question? I don't know anything about it. How do I learn more about that? And it's like, just ask people. But come from a place of curiosity. Like, and the example that we've talked about so many times is when people want to know my heritage and they ask where I'm from. Okay. And we did the story about the lady from the Buckingham Palace who almost interrogated a guest at a luncheon about where she was from, right? And that's a typical example. You can ask a question where there's an underlying assumption, or you can ask a question where you've no assumptions, you've an open mind, and you're really genuinely curious, and accept the answer that they want to share. And so many times I've nearly been in an argument with somebody about where I'm from because they disagree about where I'm from. But anyway, lots of people have that. But yeah, you're right. Asking with curiosity is the best advice you can give someone.
Yeah, and it's interesting how that will evolve, because, you know, I know that happened with my mum and dad, and you know, back in England, and it's still happening now. Tracy, it's happening with you, and you know, Frankie, you know, you shared that you've got children who are of mixed race, and so, you know, it's going to be interesting to see how, when they you know, as they grow up, and how and when they have their conversations, you know, so how is that going to be framed? Hopefully it won't even be an issue.
Hopefully it won't even be a question. It's always curious. Obviously, when you can see a difference, it's curious. It's like, oh, I've seen biracial children that look, and this assumption, black background, like African background and Asian background, and I just think, wow. But I'm biased. I'll be honest. Put my hand up. I think biracial children are beautiful. So I'm a bit biased with that.
Yeah, I do too. I can't help it. But I also need to stop making them because I can't do anymore. I've contributed 2 to the world. That's it. But yeah, what you were saying, Bhavna, like it's already kind of happened to Josie, and I've seen it happen, which is so awful. She's like, I was born here. What are you talking about? Like she's almost 5, and a woman came up to her and was like, she has a bit of an American twang because she's picked it up from me, and she's like, oh, where are you from? And I'm like, and Josie's like, I'm here, obviously, like I'm right here. What are you talking about? But I've seen it happen to Dave, my partner, as well. Like people ask where you're from, and I'm the American, and people will ask him first. They're like, oh, where are you from? And he's like, I was born here. Why would you say it like that?
Yeah, I know it's common. So yeah, how to address that resourcefully is just always interesting.
Yeah, it's the tidbits. You have to be a good listener as well. Like you can't just ask questions. You like I dropped the tidbit, for them to get curious about.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we're running out of time. I just want to ask you one more question because brilliant. I'd love, we could stay here for hours, couldn't we, really? But anyway, what advice would you give to anyone working in the creative industries, given all you've experienced?
For sure. Starting off, like definitely advocate for yourself. It's a bit of a psychological game. So as soon as you get into a workplace, set up your lines that you're not going to cross and stick to them. So don't get to work an hour early. Don't do it. Just show up on time. It's fine. You could be 5 minutes early if you want and leave on time. Like, there'll be emergency situations where like you have to do something at night, but then like you are doing them a great deal by doing this thing, and you make it seem that way and you say, that's right, thank you. Let's make up for it another way. And then as you go, like definitely try to expose yourself to as many different people as you can. Just like learn from them, learn from their experiences. If you're a graphic designer, you're also a graphic communicator. Like you're communicating to the masses. Like anybody can see your stuff now with the internet. So just make sure you're always thinking about who the audience is, who the audience could be. Am I making something that would speak to them, would just speak to as many people as possible? What else? Try to be an ally if you can. Like if you're shy, like do the tactics I was just talking about. Like get curious, talk to people in the workplace, learn a bit about them. If you're a creative, like a visual communicator, try to get those things into your concept pieces. Like I said, with the stock imagery, definitely try to use a diverse group of people that represent the audience or the country that you live in. Band together, that's a good one. Like there's definitely going to be times in your career where you're the sole person, the sole designer, the expert on a project, the art director for a client, things like that. So in those moments, take any knowledge and any friends that you have that you've packed together and use that as strength towards advocating for yourself and making good work.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. I love that advice. I really do.
Yeah,
and especially the setting boundaries, because I think that's really lacking sometimes, and often with women who feel they have to, almost like they have to prove themselves. And I've been guilty of this. You just have to, your 100%, my 100%, I'm talking about me really, used to be above and beyond whatever anybody asked of me, basically. And often that would go outside of the normal hours, often. And it became like the norm, and that can be problematic. It's just not, it's not good for you. It's not good. It's not even good for whoever you're working for. So yeah, I really, really love that advice. Thanks for sharing that, Frankie.
For sure. The only reason I've been able to like figure these things out is because I'm a contractor and because I've been able to reset so many times, and I learn each of these little things each time. So I've made these mistakes myself, like I've done them, and so now I'm like, I've got this little formula that I follow when I take on a new client.
Yeah, actually that's a good point, because you can be able to reset, start afresh, start anew with a new client, how you want to move forward. And that might not be as easy if you're staying in the same company, because you've been giving this behavior for such a long time. So turn around suddenly and go, right, I'm not doing that anymore, can be quite a jolting experience for, the people that you work with. So that's a really good point, actually. So you'd have to be a bit more gentle with that. Think about how you do that.
Yeah, it's hard. So hopefully, like if you're going to take on that advice, hopefully you're not in a position where you feel like it's too late. It's like it's never too late. It might be hard, but you can do it.
Exactly. Never too late. All right. Bhavna, have you got anything else you want to add before we wrap
No,
it
I
up?
suppose one final thing I wanted to ask you, Frankie, was if you could change one thing about the creative industry to help, which would help up and coming young women entering the industry, what would it be?
If I was going to sum it up in one word, inclusivity, which I think you guys know that word pretty well. Being inclusive in everything you do. And if you are a creative leader at any company, agency, whatever it is, you have to make the change for those people coming in. Like it's so hard for them to fight that battle themselves. You have to have a backbone, and you have to push back, and you have to do these little things that make them feel welcomed, make them feel confident that they're good at what they do, and don't fear the little talkings that are happening up here. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, if the people down here are happy, they're going to do good work for you. It's going to happen. Your clients will be happy, and then they'll be happy. So
yeah, absolutely. And Hendy agrees. He just said, my dog, he was barking then. And yes, be the allies who are inclusive, and senior leaders who are inclusive. Absolutely. Because that helps everyone.
Yeah, it's not fair to put the pressure on the people coming in.
No, not at all.
That's valuable insight and advice there, Frankie. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. It's been such a pleasure talking to you today.
Same.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me. This is lovely.
Well, welcome. I would like to get on with the rest of your day. Enjoy the time with your children.
Thanks, will do. They're just waiting outside the door for me, so I'm going to give them a hug now.
All right.
Thanks,
Frankie.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Oh, that was awesome. She's amazing.
She's lovely, Frankie.
Yeah. Oh, such a wise woman. And she's, all these experiences, and she's such an advocate. She knows.
Yeah, it was really interesting hearing about that, those experiences, those key experiences of her, moving from the US, like being able to compare like different regions, like countries, like US versus Australia, and then they sharing that experience, that shocking like situation with a creative agency that she was with around that Mardi Gras communication. And just the advice, the invaluable advice that she's given to women who are entering the tech industry or who are currently working in the tech industry, and maybe trying to find it difficult to navigate through some of these issues that we cover. So that was very insightful,
and really good perspective, and she had really, really valuable advice to share. And she's echoing on what we say all the time. Allyship is really important. And it shouldn't be the responsibility of the underrepresented, like women, like people of color, to have to educate people or even, I don't like to say the word fight, but it is almost like a fight so hard to be valued, to be seen, to have opportunities, to smash through that glass ceiling. It shouldn't be solely on the shoulders of people.
It's really interesting to hear how how Frankie's on that other side that we don't see in terms of the decision making. I know it's not always down to Frankie, but Frankie's working with the decision makers in terms of who are we going to have to represent our brand, our voice, our community, our company, our vision. And seeing how, in some areas, like as Frankie mentioned, like for example, in the fashion industry, yes, there's certain differences that's really being seen, but there's still such a long way to go. And that's something that leaders in the industry, really should be focusing on.
So if I asked you, what was the key thing, the message that you took away from speaking to Frankie today?
I think it was what I've just mentioned now, is the fact that how different industries have evolved or haven't evolved over the last 20 years, and how much change is being seen in specific areas or industries compared to not. And like I would have, we share news articles from different industries, whether it be finance, whether it be entertainment, fashion, whether it be like any other industry. And it's interesting to hear from Frankie about how there's only really certain industries that have really made, there's still such a long way to go. There's only certain industries which have made a significant difference. So, and even when it comes to regions, like the USA, it was only 6 years ago, Frankie mentioned, but it's like she had those experiences in the US, and then compared to what she's experienced in Australia in 6 years, and so I suppose that for me was that real takeaway point.
Okay. I guess for me, I've always felt that other countries or other developed countries are in a lot of ways more ahead than Australia. And I noticed that when I moved here 15 years ago, I always felt in lots of different ways, Australia was quite behind. And one of those would have been the diversity inclusivity. We talk about media representation way, way behind. Given the population in Australia of Australians that are non-white, it's very behind. But anyway, and so that was something that struck me, that she noticed it. And coming from America as well would be noticeable. And then the other thing that I really liked of what she said about the work she does. And, she represents different brands, fashion, pharma. She represents so many industries with their digital communications, if you like. Does this make people feel welcome? When you're communicating with them, do they feel welcome? And when you say people, I'm assuming she means all people in the country, your target audience. And then it goes to speak to, well, is your target audience only white people over 50? Or is your target audience everyone that you can help who may be non-white, LGBTQI, able-bodied, or living with a disability, or living with chronic disease, or neurodiverse, whatever? Do you make all those people feel welcome? And she said, she used that term, do they feel welcome? And that's the thing that stuck with me. And the other thing I loved about what she said was how you can advocate simply by being curious and getting to know different people that are different from yourself. That was what I took away.
That was a good guest speaker there.
It was. Thanks for inviting her. It's good. All right. We'll wrap it up for today.
Great.
Thank you, Bhavna, as always.
I hope our listeners enjoyed that. And I'll see you soon.
I'll see you soon. Speak to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.